couple of other things, since I'm the timekeeper, I have to be mindful, that we've developed over time, and then I'll try to wrap this up with telling you how this has helped us respond to today's situation. When I first got here, the natural instinct for the organization was, first of all, it never had any money, and then if it made any money, it would immediately spend it. And so I instituted a program to create some reserves. We called them board reserves, we called them expansion funds, over the years, different things, but we created some reserves, and now we have a significant reserve. And this doesn't have anything to do with a supporting foundation. We also set up a supporting foundation, which I think all of you should do if you don't already have one. But we set up some board reserves internally that we could draw on, and we also set up some creative things within that. One of them was called the Enterprise Fund. And the idea here is just a simple idea. You get the board to back you up on creating a temporarily restricted fund so that when you need to spend money on sort of an interesting idea that has the potential to be sold in one way or another, whether it's intellectual capital like a book or whether it's a product or whatever in your store, then you have the money sitting there and you can do it. And the idea is you develop the product, and again, it could be a book, it could be a backpack in your store, it could be a water bottle, it could be anything. You've got the money, you spend it, you can develop the product, and then as you sell the product, you replenish the fund first, and then you have what's left over to actually add to your general operating support. And that has been a wellspring for us. It's only $20,000. I think it has $23,000 in it now because we've replenished it too much. But the whole idea was to always keep it at a certain amount, but you knew that you had this little fund that you could go to when you wanted to do something different. And that's been very useful. We also have an advocacy fund where we set up some money in case we needed to be able to hire a lobbyist or an advocate at any time. So we had the board designate that and then being able to use it. So for example, in the past few months with federal stimulus money flowing around, we have that option if we think we can use it. We don't think we are going to use it, but it's there. And so the idea is you've got those little tools sitting there for you. And then just a couple things. We have been, just like everybody else, adapting to the current situation. We're very fortunate because we rely less on state and federal funding than perhaps some other institutions. And we have an adequate base of support from York County. I don't know if you all recognize this, but our system of museums started as a children's museum in 1948, and since 1955 it has been supported in part by county property taxes. When I first got here, that support was about 74% of the budget. It's now about 60% of our combined budget, but it's still a major component. And as we grow, we hope that will actually drop down to about 35 or 40% because we'll create new earned and contributed income. We're in the project of building a new museum on the Catawba River. You've probably heard about that. And we're also developing kind of a small but mighty children's museum in downtown Rock Hill. So we have a lot going on, many different moving parts. A couple of my favorite sayings is leadership has no path. You kind of make it as you walk. But you better make sure that you, as they say in the military, cover your ASS, or another way to put it is to consolidate your rear. And those two things don't quite mean the same thing, but the point is make sure somebody's following you, because it's not going to do you any good if you get out on that path and there's nobody behind you. Then ergo, it would not be leadership. And then another one of my favorite sayings is, I don't know what I'm doing. And I freely admit this often because it's good to freely admit that, because at the end of the day it kind of opens yourself up to go to some place that you don't know. And that's important, and especially when you're dealing with a situation where you have to be entrepreneurial, you have to be nimble, you have to think about how to be able to make tough decisions, and if you align your organization well to begin with, I think you can respond to just about anything. That doesn't mean there won't be pain, because there will be. So anyway, I'd be happy to answer questions later. We'll move on. Thank you.
I'm Susan Daniels at Fascinate-U Childrens Museum in Fayetteville. I'm going to kind of take a different approach on this subject, in being that in a perfect world we do drive where we want to go with our mission and what direction with our programs, but oftentimes, and in the case I'm going to talk about today, it was driven by funding, who was funding us when, how, and what for. And North Carolina had a initiative that started maybe 11, 12 years ago, Partnership for Children, and Cumberland County at the time was one of the first counties that were implementing it. And over the 10 years between 98 and 2008, well, I would say maybe 2005, 2006, the funding kept increasing. The state was doing well. There was a lot of money out there. When I came aboard Fascinate-U, we were receiving $12,000 a year, and this money was earmarked for pre-K programs. The money could not generate funds to help the museum run. The program had to be self-contained. All money that came in from the program had to be spent on the program. Well, with a budget of $100,000 at the time, and $12,000 of it came from the Smart Start program, we had, of course, that was a major part of our programming. And over the years, as the money increased, our allocations did. In 2005, we were up to $50,000 from the state or the local partnership. And then we generated another $10,000 in program fees. So that had grown from a $12,000 a year program to $60,000, but none of the money was helping me run the museum once again. But it was a good program. It was useful. We had about 100 families a quarter involved in the program. It was very intensive for stay-at-home moms who didn't have the opportunity to, have a lot of resources. And so we had the program at the museum, and about 60% were military families. Well, 2 months before the end of the 2005-2006 year, I found out from the partnership that they were changing their direction, and my program would not be funded any longer. So there's $60,000 and 2.5 staff people that I lost. Along with the program itself had an office space in the back and probably several hundred square feet of program space that was being used by the staff and the people in the program. So I had space that was back there that was, had been occupied. Well, in the meantime, between 98, about 2001, 2002, North Carolina also has a program called the Grassroots Science Museum Collaborative, which is funded through the state legislation. And we have a senator who's been around a long while, and he called me up and he said, "Susan, why are we not receiving this grassroots science money?" And I said, "Well, that would kind of be up to you." Well, 2 years later, we're receiving grassroots science money. And our grassroots money was based on our expenses. So when I lost that $60,000, I was potentially losing another $10,000 in grassroots money because I didn't have the cash flow. Even though that program didn't help the museum, it did help my bottom line in expenses. Well, instead of it could have been disastrous. We panicked. What are we going to do? There were, pros and cons all along with the program. How it was good for the museum, good for the community, and I spent probably 20 hours a quarter, doing paperwork just to prove that we spent the money the way we were supposed to, and I didn't get reimbursed for that kind of time. So once we got over the devastation, and my staff got over, losing their jobs. They didn't want to stay on in a part-time. They wanted to move on. We started looking at that space. What can we do with it? So what they had used as an office, we then turned around and turned into a second birthday party room. Children's museums can generate tons of revenue on birthday parties. The space where they had been doing their programming, we could now open to the public, and we had a tot facility, a preschool area, and a place where kids who did not come in school groups could get away from the 60 to 70 kids roaming the floor. And over the course of 3 years, that space has ended up generating $33,000 that now goes into my operating budget, because it's opened up a whole new way that people look at us. Now we're available. It's not an exclusive area just for programming, but it's for anybody who's in there to use.